what's the right thing to do? How close?
Yeah.
What's acceptable and what people feel comfortable with.
Right.
Yeah. Because I'm okay hugging, but that's just me personally. I don't know, what the other person feels. So
Right.
I back off. I'm like, okay.
How are you feeling, Jen?
I'm okay.
How is the new tool working for you?
It was going swell until about like 5 minutes ago when my blood sugar dropped. But prior to that, it's been amazing. But it's a learning curve. It's trial and error of determining like how much insulin to give per hour versus what I'm eating. So it's going to be a little like experimental for the next couple of weeks, which I'm on board for. But I was having a low,
Hmm.
uh, but I drank juice, so I'm just waiting.
Hmm.
Good.
But
So
I don't
does
even feel it. I mean, it's huge, but I can't feel it. It's amazing. It is absolutely amazing. This is 3 days worth of insulin in my arm.
Oh,
Wow.
and you just have to refill it.
Every 3 days, yeah. You take it off and then you get a new one and you inject insulin into that and then you stick it to your arm and you press a button and it automatically like goes into your arm.
and is it all digital?
Yeah, it's so cool.
That's really cool.
I can't believe I waited this long.
So Cindy, you have one of those too?
No, Jessica does.
Okay.
Yeah. But hers is corded.
My
But
friend Jessica has one too.
oh, does she?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. I used to get really excited when I met other diabetics. I mean, I'm not diabetic, my daughter is, but I get really excited when I found somebody.
Yeah. Community.
Oh, Jen, can you make me co-host, please?
I thought I did.
You have not.
Okay, let me do it again.
Real fat is stressing me out.
What's the matter, Izzy?
I just can't figure out how to do the flowers on the mule fat.
Oh, an embroidery anxiety.
No, different stakes, but trying to figure it out. And it's looking at pictures.
Beautiful. Hold it up again. It's really
Thank you.
beautiful.
Oh yeah, sure. I'm just trying to figure out the flower part. Because it's like, purple, and then I have these two I haven't used yet for the flowers, but we'll see how they come together.
It looks beautiful.
Thank you.
Lauren, I love your view shed.
Oh, thanks. What are you liking?
I just like the way the paintings are sighted like as a horizon line kind of above the
Yeah.
floor. The way it kind of, I feel like I'm kind of on the inside of your mind. Like it's like this mental universe. I just really like the way the
So glad. I'm so
look.
glad. It's the light outside is so beautiful right now, so I wanted to just let the natural light
I like that.
shine on the wall because like I'm just feeling like that dialogue between the shadow side and the light side.
Yeah.
I was I was noticing that, these computer cameras are really good with certain kinds of light.
Yeah. I
And
also feel like that view kind of reminds me of like the inside of like a spaceship. So it's like
Yeah.
a spaceship filled with paintings, and then
I
you're
think it's very like
I was
like
headquarters.
I don't know if you guys know the painter De Chirico, but he's an Italian painter and he painted a lot of cityscapes with a really strong, like forced perspective like that.
cool.
To sort of compress the space, it wasn't exactly right.
Yeah.
So I also feel like this is like a painting in a painting.
Yeah.
Like I somehow don't know if it's virtual or a virtual backdrop, even though I'm sitting here. Like, it makes it even more confusing for me because I'm sitting here, but that is not, I don't believe that's where I'm sitting.
Right. It's really
There-
trippy when you think about it.
normally can't see the back of your head. So, like, it's like this is a fully 3D view.
Yeah.
My like crazy musical practice with Sharon. These are all our collective
Yeah.
paintings, and but to be able to look at it by front is
Right.
is a very weird, completely novel situation.
Yeah, I love it. It's really cool.
It is. I think that's the most interesting thing I've learned this COVID year is about Zoom and like the strange sense of space like we've been playing with Sonic Division. And remember those months of playing with virtual backgrounds?
Yeah, yeah,
That was very trippy stuff.
totally. Ooh,
Well, I
looks
guess
like
we're supposed to
Answers
let
come
other
to pass.
people in to our private conversation, although I just hang out with you all.
I know the green room is pretty sweet. You know, it's hard to break it open, but I guess we have to at some point.
So, I finally got Ruby's syllabus for the next
Oh,
Oh,
good.
good.
session. Um, but I would like to talk with you guys about it when we meet on Tuesday. So if you don't mind, even though it's a weekend, can I send you her syllabus to look over so that,
Absolutely.
Totally.
all right, thank you for your flexibility. Let me just preface this by saying there's two options. One is to do it, and one is not to do it.
Right.
Um, the not to do it option would mean that we would bank it for another time, right? It's not that we wouldn't do it right now, but plan B for me would be to read Mushrooms at the End of the World for 10 weeks.
Oh my God, so amazing.
So we would just stick with that book and do 10 pages a week for 10 weeks or 100 pages and just focus ourselves to read one book instead of many and just say we need to like regroup a little bit after the
There's
intensity.
something very romantic about that.
So
I want
that's plan B, and I'll send you the syllabus so you can help me brainstorm that because I think both Jaime and James, who's a mycologist, would be a really good discussion helpers. And James is going to continue the breathing practice.
Awesome.
So I also want you to consider that it's James and Jaime who are going to be doing this, and they're both very natural teachers, and they both love mushrooms.
I want that. I
Both
want
very
Selfish
gentle.
Feet. That's
Yeah.
my favorite book. So
So have a look at her syllabus, and we'll talk on Tuesday. And okay, now I relinquish the desire to chat with you to the
I
group.
know the green room's so fun.
Okay, are we ready?
yeah, people are gonna start leaving.
All right.
Okay, let
All
them
right,
in.
here we go.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. So good to see all of you here. Some new faces, some familiar faces. While we're waiting for other people to sign in, we are going to feature the embroidery of the week. And this week, it was very hard. There's so many good ones. I have to tell you, each week it's a struggle. But what I really loved about this one was it had a different stitching technique that I hadn't seen before. So I'm going to share it with you now. It's Maria's. And I don't know if she signed up, but I don't know if she's here yet. But if you look through at the orange, I cannot for the life of me figure out how she did that. It's like little loops, but they're like twisted. And again, because I like to be consistent, look how clean the back is. So this is Maria's, and again, the looping, and I love the textures for this one. So then what we'll do now is we'll do introductions, and I'll start. I'm Jen, and I am calling in from Studio City, and tonight I will be working on the bird here, which I've gotten some more leaves done in since last week. And I use she, her pronouns, and I will pass it on to Cascade.
Yours is beautiful also, Jen. My name is Cascade. I'm calling in from Jefferson Park, and I am continuing my work on my common raven. It doesn't look that great right now, and the back looks really bad, so I'll have to ask Maria about that. Very impressive. I will call on Miss Olan Jones.
Hello, Olan, calling in from West Hollywood using she, her pronouns. Um, Starting on the hermit thrush, just starting the leaves around it. And happy to be here, even though a little sleepy. And I will call on B.
You're muted, B.
Am I unmuted now? Okay, I'm B. Jones, and I'm calling in from Los Angeles. It's the area that they call Carthay Circle. And I'm working on some pollinators. Let's see if I can manage to. My background is my virtual. I never know which way to turn it. There. Yeah, and the background is as important as the front. You're supposed to have a neat background. So I keep looking at mine. It's not quite there yet, but I'm working on it. And let's see who else is here. I'll call on Cynthia.
Hi, I'm Cindy. I'm calling in from West Covina. And I finally finished my embroidery, but I don't have a new one for tonight. So I'm going to put a pin on it and start one next week. I go by she, her pronouns. And I will pass it on to Susan.
Hi, I'm Susan, and I'm calling in from Santa Monica Mountains, and I'm happy to be with everyone this evening. And I will pass it on to Jen.
Oh, I'll take it from Jen because Jen already left. Thanks, Susan. Good to see you back. I'm Emily here in Echo Park. She, her pronouns. Happy to be with you all. Missed you last week. And yes, very excited for the book tonight. Let me go ahead and pass it off to Ansu. Welcome back, Ansu. Good to see you.
See you. Hi, Emily. Hi, everyone. I'm Sue John. I'm calling in from Claremont in the San Gabriel Valley, positioning my head right, and go by she, hers. And just in a minute, when the reading starts, I'm going to find my glasses and get my embroidery out. I'm still working on my pollinator, but it's really good to see everybody. So I'm going to throw the ball to Michelle.
And hi, I'm Michelle. I'm in Highland Park. I go by he, him. I'm working on some marsh fleabane here, and happy to be here. And I find the embroidery is excellent. I don't dare to do it too much because I'm really not good at it, but I really enjoy to see what's being done and the relationship we all have. I think it's just so important. Thank you. And I will go with Easy.
Hello, everyone. I'm Izzy. My pronouns are she, they. I'm in Mid-City, Los Angeles, and tonight I will be working on this mule fat that I'm almost done with. And I will call on Patricia.
Hi, I'm Patricia in Santa Fe, New Mexico, land of the Tewa people. I don't have anything to work on today. I've been MIA for the last 3 weeks, and I sent in what I finished with my bumblebee. So I guess I just have to request another one, or okay. I'm going to pass it off to Martha.
Hi, everyone. I'm in Talent, Oregon, she, her. And I didn't get a chance to see the embroidery. I don't know if you shared it on the screen or not, but it sounded amazing. And I'm kind of, I don't know what to say about the backside of my work. I'm a little, I'm a little daunted by that. It's hard enough to get the front side looking okay. So anyway, I'll strive. Let's see, who hasn't spoken? How about Millie?
Hi everyone. Hi everyone, it's Millie. I'm calling from Glassell Park, a couple miles away from the LA River. Just getting home, and I think I don't have anything planned for tonight, but I may just listen in and relax. Let's see, who else hasn't gone? Jen, I'm on my iPad. Do you mind choosing some for me?
Oh, sure. Let's see. Caroline.
So good evening. My name is Caroline, and I'm very happy to be with all of you tonight. And I'm gonna be also listening and learning. Thank you. Me. I'll pass it to. Did anyone? I let Jen choose. I don't know who didn't go yet.
Roxanne wants to go.
Roxanne.
Hi everybody. So happy to be here. I am calling from, or checking in from Venice Beach, she, her, and I am starting a new embroidery today of one of the birds, and I don't remember which one it is, and I'm going to run and get it as soon as I have a blink of time. I don't know who's gone since I was so late. Jen, can you pick somebody, please?
Yes, Joan, would you like to go?
Sure. I'm so happy to be able to be back. I guess many of us are working on the pollinator, and I didn't pick it up again until a few weeks ago. It's really fun that there are so many of us working on the same one. So I'm looking forward to seeing all of the results and learning how to make a neater back. I'm working on that too. Thank you.
So at this time, we'll start. If you didn't have an opportunity to introduce yourself and share what you're working on, there'll be time at the end of the discussion period. The Metabolic Studios Learning and Mending series is now in its third evolution. This time around, we're addressing suffocation. Growing through the last two gatherings, the first learning syllabus in response to ongoing racial violence, particularly at the hands of the police, and the second holding space for the megafires that have consumed the West. And now, with the advent of COVID-19, we feel it's imperative to address the larger reality of suffocation and the need for us to revive our breath. In order to get a deeper understanding of these crises and how they are interconnected, we are building upon the readings in the last two series. Abolitionist writings by Black women and Native American perspectives of land stewardship. Since the ongoing pandemic began, we have moved our weekly public studio practice to Zoom, where we have committed ourselves to learning and mending together. We invite you to receive these readings as a deep inhale, and we find that crafting together helps to receive these readings as meditation. Many of you have received embroidery kits from us of native plants representing the food and medicine that Metabolic Studios cultivating. If you haven't received an embroidery kit and would like to, please send your name and mailing address to info@metabolicstudio.org. And Cindy will put that in the chat bar right now. We decided to close the entrance to the Zoom space after the first 15 minutes of the reading to protect the flow and keep a steady breath. These gatherings are being recorded through Zoom for archival purposes. We thank you for co-creating this opportunity to learn and to mend together during quarantine. Tonight, we'll read from William Lest Heat Moon's book, Prairie Earth, A Deep Map, from chapter Upon the First Terrace. We will share our screen, and we encourage you to read a section of the text out loud with us. When there is a pause in the reading, please feel free to unmute yourself and begin where the last person left off. Silence is golden, and there is no pressure to fill the transitional spaces while we enjoy a breath and continue crafting. Feel free to jump in and continue reading at your own comfort level. You don't have to read. It's also fine to enjoy listening. And now I will pass it over to Izzy, where she will begin the breathwork.
Thank you, Jen. Okay, hello everyone. So if you could find a comfortable seat, please. And if it's okay with you, please close your eyes. Coming into stillness, take a deep breath in. Filling the lungs, the chest, and a slow out breath. Releasing, deepening, letting go. Again, breathe in deeply, filling the lungs and chest, and breathe out slowly, releasing, letting go. Begin to gently scan the body. Relax the brow. Soften the eyes. Unhinge the jaw. Relax the tongue. Inhale. Exhale, deepen. Let the shoulders fall away from the neck. Open the chest. Relax the heart. And let this next breath be received as a softening of the belly. Inhale, deepen your state of awareness. Exhale, relax into that state. Inhale. Let your breath energize you. Acknowledge it as an energizing force. Exhale. Root down and center your energy. Now on the next in breath, feel your breath reinvigorate you, wake you up a bit, maybe a jolt. Exhale, sigh, release. Wiggle your fingers and your toes. Maybe roll your shoulders back. Begin to open up the eyes. Yeah, stretch your arms up if that feels nice. Sway a little bit. Side to side, all around. Washing machine, sprinkler. and then come back to center. Okay, thank you everyone. So yes, I believe Emily will be sharing the screen tonight for the text. As Jen mentioned, we're reading William Least Heat Moon's Prairie Earth, which is really big, but we're only reading a small section of it. And it's a really fun text. Well, kind of sad, but really exciting at the same time. It's a complicated book. So pass it to Emily.
Thanks, Izzy. All right, let me pull up my screen here for our reading tonight. And I will echo the sentiment of this just being a reading selection tonight that I'm really excited about. What a special, unique book with so many layers to it. And here is the chapter that we landed on. And let us begin.
Upon the first terrace, 1. Now, this is Tom Bridge. Most of the dust storms in southeastern Colorado blew in from the north. I was a boy, 7, 8, 9, in the early 30s, Dust Bowl days. For a long distance, we could see them coming, the dusters. We looked north, and there was a curtain of brown dust, sometimes black. The storm came on like a cliff. The sun shone right into the irregularities in that wall, and it was like looking into a canyon. There was a period of quiet. The air got still as the dust came on. It was hundreds of feet high, and then the high velocity winds that were riding over the top of the storm roared in. It turned so dark I could hardly see the end of my arm. We watched from the house, and we felt the grit between our teeth, and pressure changes pulled dust into the house and into everything: linens, trunks, hat boxes. Lids weren't any use, so my mother hung wet towels over the windows, and when we went out, she had us wrap wet clothes over our mouths and noses. The dust was silt, fine quartz sand, pulled up off the alluvial fan east of the Rockies. I'm at the dinner table in the Bridges house, a solid 1.5-story red brick, red tiled roof place built in 1921 in Saffordville. Although it's not a big home, even today it stands out in the country. For 22 years, Tom Bridge, tall and angular, has taught geology at Emporia State University, but he grew up on the Colorado grasslands at the foot of the Front Range.
After a duster, we'd go out and hunt arrowheads. The wind had carried off the lighter topsoil, and the flint points lay shining on the hard pan. I had cigar boxes of them dug up by the wind. We lived near a leg of the Santa Fe Trail where the ruts were compacted so hard that the wind would blow away the soil around them. and following a storm, we'd find ruts raised like railroad tracks. We never had to open a gate after a duster. The fences would catch the tumbleweed and make a windbreak, and the drifts covered the barbed wire. We rode our horses right over the fences. In 1966, he got lost and drove into Saffordville and asked the old banker's son for directions to a piece of land Tom was considering buying. The son said he might sell him his house, and later he did, and all along the bridge knew that the house sat in the floodplain of the Cottonwood River. Anybody who grows up inhaling dry bits of the Rocky Mountains might do the same. He moved in with his wife Sybil and their 4 children, and it's quite possible that they will be the last citizens in Saffordville. From 1966 to 1973, they averaged a flood a year, but the water never got higher than the basement. Tom didn't complain about the flooding, but he did about Sybil's overstocking canned goods because they seemed a needless burden. In 1985, the river began to swell and the bridges began raising furniture. But they were soon out of bricks and concrete blocks, and they started setting cans of corn, tomato soup, and V8 juice under the furniture legs. Of the 3 inhabited houses remaining in Saffordville, the Bridges is the farthest from the river, but on the lowest ground, and it isn't feasible to raise the brick house as their neighbors, the Statlers, did their big 2-story frame place. So while the radio crackled out flood updates, the Bridges put down cans of chili and pork and beans, their sole defense against the river, and not much more effective than wet towels against dusters.
As goes the Cottonwood River, so goes Chase County. Through the 250-million-year-old limestone hills, the typically slow waters have cut a 60-mile dogleg trough northeast, east. Before the recent building of several impoundments, all the storm runoff in the county, but for 2 small portions in the south, as well as much of the drainage of Marion County, rolled past Saffordville. While nearly every village in Chase sits in the valley of the Cottonwood or one of its tributaries, only Saffordville on the east, sooner or later, gets the runoff from 1,700 square miles, an immense drainage for such a small channel. Without the Cottonwood watershed, there would never have been much settlement in Chase or agriculture other than upland grazing, and the railroad and Highway 50 would not likely have passed this way, since transport crosses the hills through the gaps cut by the Cottonwood and South Fork. The valleys hold the towns and the cultivation, but only 14% of the county is bottomland, and it is the rain that falls on the other 86%, the uplands, that creates floods. Like Cain, the ancient Hawaiian shark god, the Cottonwood gives life and destruction with equal nonchalance. Now, the river is rising. The uplands in saturation, they can no longer hold the rain, and they slough it down the slopes to the creeks where a few days earlier quiet waters flowed blue-gray, the color of moonstone, but now they climb banks and rip off ledges with mad turnings of earthen roil, and where they join larger streams, they meet walls of water and back up until the whole county, its veinings of waterways become a massive thrombus, starts to overflow, and the word goes out by radio, by neighbors in pickups, rivers on the rise, and all the time it's raining so long that the Emporia Gazette has time to print front page jokes about it. If you've been saving for a rainy day, brother, this is it. Raining, and the cottonwood, now 30 feet deep, tops out and starts across the bottoms and begins losing its 100 serpentines as it straightens itself to fit the more linear contours of the valley. And the word goes out, take high ground. And people wonder, am I high enough? And now only parallel lines of cottonwoods and sycamores and willows mark the usual river course. And a man stands on a bridge and remembers how last week his rowboat hardly moved in the slow river when he fished east of the old mill dam. And now the silent river has voice, loud, and one fellow says to his son, it's that sound I don't like. And farmers start their combines and tractors, and one machine won't fire up and move them to higher ground. How high is high enough? And is there time to get the cattle out? And everywhere along the South Fork and the Cottonwood, the usual argument. I'm not leaving. This is where I live. This is mine. And the old benign river turns malevolent, and a farmer shouts at his wife, it's sweeping us away. And she won't listen because women here are always the last to leave. And out back the corn and milo are slipping under, green to brown. And she shouts, I'm going upstairs. And he shouts too, no, you're not. And she, it's not taking my house while I stand up on the bluff, not this river. And he, it ain't no river now. It's a thing moving as if it knows what made this valley and knows its million-year right of tenancy. And it's going to tear out the fences and flush the squatters and their privies away and scrub the valley of the septic intrusion and let them go down with their hogs and stories of Noah. The river has risen.
This is Sybil Bridge, small and trim. She says to me, the problem isn't the water really, it's the mud that stays behind. The water drains out, but the mud settles. And Tom says, and he's thinking of Dust Bowl days too, we get that same layer, that same type of dust or mud precipitated out of water. I'm laughing and I say, all your life, you keep getting soil in your house from one agency or another. You're an earth scientist and earth keeps coming in to live with you. It must make you glad you're not an entomologist or a mortician. I ask, where did you see the water first? And she says, in 85, I opened the basement door and it was coming up the stairs at me. It was rising faster than we'd seen it do before. I'd already gotten my home canned goods from down below, and then they went under up here, sweet pickles and dills. Afterward, we were afraid to eat them, but we ate the stuff in tin cans. 24 jars of pickles, still pretty and green, went to the dump, along with some furniture and mattresses and rugs. 3 flatbed truckloads. You understand, in 85, we never left the house. That's the way it is for us here. Our neighbors don't leave either. We have one room upstairs, and Tom and I go up to it, but we come down in our rubber boots and sit in the water to eat at that table. The man who built this house, Bill Immasha, the banker, did the same thing, went upstairs and waited it out. During a flood, Stanley North would come up to the back of the house in a rowboat to bring Bill his paper and mail and milk every day. In 51, they took the screen off the upstairs window to pass things in. Before he pulled away, Stanley said, you want the screen back on? No, says Bill, leave it off. I'll swat flies. It'll give me something to do. The floods never bothered him, but people say that his wife's severe heart trouble came from worrying over this house flooding. He watched his pennies, but she shook him loose to build this place.
The Bridges have lived here 22 years, and I ask why they don't at least build a levee around the house. A 4-foot burn should do it. And Tom says, when we get time. I ask whether living here makes them watch the sky, and he says, we've had floods when we've had no rain in our place. We have to listen to the radio, go down to the bridge to check on the river, especially at night when we can't see it coming over the fields. Sybil says, when the forecast is for flood, Tom starts moving vehicles to higher ground, and I mow the lawn so the grass clippings will wash away. If the forecast was for flooding tomorrow, I'd head right now for the canned goods, especially juice cans, the 46-ounce size. 2 years ago, it was 10 inches in this room, but inside it was 5 feet, and that's what damaged the house. When we bought it, we had to put everything inside back together. We decorated with the idea that things would probably get wet. Now Sybil is setting the table to serve a roast and mashed potatoes and broccoli. And she says, in high water, it gets quiet. About all we hear is the water slopping outside. Tom, this house is a riverboat that won't float. I'll look out a window and see carp jumping on the lawn, frogs in the basement, cordwood floating off the porch. And Sybil, I looked out the window in '85 and saw the workbench float out the garage, and Eddie carried it away. It wasn't a regular workbench. It was an old grand piano that had been gutted, but it had fancy carved legs. We kept tools and nails sitting on. We watched it float out, go past the house, moving right along. It stopped over east in Edith's field, tools still on top of it. Tom, I had 3 Honda motorcycles in the garage. They went beneath. There isn't time to get everything, so we go for the books first, then things in the basement. I turn off the electricity if water's coming upstairs. Sybil got shocked the last time. You'll feel the electric current in the water, a kind of vibrating. It can kill you. We take oil lamps to the second floor. The toilet stops working. The bathtub backs up with foul stuff. There's no question, a flood's inconvenient.
Sybil, you don't live in a floodplain and get excited about water. Now, a tornado gets us excited. Tom calls us collectors who need a flood every so often to clear things out anyway. When the water drops, we get the brooms and hose and squirt it and keep the water riled up. Make it take the mud back out. If you let the mud dry, it's like concrete. We pump out the basement. The Bridges have no flood insurance, and Tom tells me he sold their canoe. And Sybil says, I don't want out in a flood in a canoe or anything else. They don't have a CB to make up for losing the telephone when the buried lines short out. I asked Tom if he will see water in this house again, and he says, that's a real possibility, but I don't worry about it. Our lives aren't threatened. Our possessions, yes.
The meal is over, and we're talking about geology, and someone has said that the Kansas pioneers' great fear was drought. I say, since erosion is the primary geologic force in Kansas, isn't it appropriate for a geologist to live amidst the cycle of flood, erosion, and deposition? And Tom says, 22 years here now, and I really understand sedimentary layering, what made these hills. Edith McGregor lives across the road. That's all it can be called now, although it once was Hunt Street. from the bridges, and she also knows that sedimentary layering is the real enemy. Her home is a large, two-story frame house, immaculately white, the kind you find along old, tree-lined front porch streets in America. And she isn't much slowed by her 82 years. She of the young hands. Her husband died a few years ago, yet she's a jolly woman, a former school teacher, as are all 5 people who live in Saffordville. And like the others, she owns no boat and would have to be unconscious before she would take to the flood in anything other than the second floor of her house. She has a master's degree in psychology. I'm seated at her kitchen table in front of the window where 6 months ago she watched the tornado come down on Toledo a mile north, and she says, "I didn't go to the basement. I wasn't turning my back on that thing." And she sets down thick slices of her wheat bread and pushes the butter towards me. She has already explained how she gets her fresh Chase County wheat from the small grain elevator by the Santa Fe tracks, and how she grinds it to add to her store flour. It's 10 in the morning, and she's wiping off a jar of home-canned pears. Dean and I came here in 1947, and we saw floods about every year. But the water never got out of the yard until 51. It came up early on Wednesday morning, and it rolled across those west bean fields like a wall, it seems. We didn't have much time before it started up the porch steps and under the front door, and then through the windows. They're low like old windows are. This is the highest house here, built in 1913 for $7,000 and paid for with 1 crop of alfalfa seed. My husband was head wire chief in Emporia, in telegraph communications for the Santa Fe. And whenever it looked like high water, he'd take out for town so he wouldn't get cut off. That Wednesday, he got the horse to higher ground and went to work. I was here with my daughter and son, both still in school. First, we crated up the chickens and took them up to the sun porch on the 2nd floor. And that was our mistake. It took too much time to run down 3 dozen fryers. We got the dining table up on boxes and the piano up on something, got it up a foot or so. We thought that was enough. And she smiles at her naivete and says, "They tell that the Indians believed a big flood would come every 100 years, but our people who build on high ground have their wells go dry in the summer. We located down here to have water. My well's been polluted by floods, but it's never gone dry."
There's the story of a woman who, in the drought of 1929, prayed hard for rain, even asking that the river overflow and water their dying corn, and it began raining, and the cottonwood rose and washed out their whole crop. And I asked, "Did you pray?" And she says, "I suppose we did. My son got scared when the water started rising in the house, but he got over it. The first floor is 4 feet above the yard. I measured the water in this kitchen, and it came to the top of the table, 33 inches. We took canned goods upstairs. I remember a lot of hominy and mackerel. Haven't eaten hominy since. Edith sets preserves and a glass of cold water on the table, and she says, "When the river's coming on, I always fill the bathtub so we can wash up and flush the toilet. Somebody will bring us drinking water." In 1951, a boat was at the house by noon to pick us up. But when the water's 6 feet deep with a current like we get here, I don't go outside. She says that as if speaking of spring showers. That boat wasn't big enough. I can't swim. Besides, I had no reason to get out. I like to stay and take care of things. I guess I'm an old river rat. She slows as she recalls the details and she says, we stayed and watched the river rise. The chicken coop washed away, and that was it for us raising chickens. The soybean crop went, but the wheat we'd already harvested. Then the second day, my son got restless and he went up on the roof with the dog and his 22 and shot at trash floating by. An airplane flew over and saw him and passed word that the McGregors were signaling for help. I wasn't scared, really wasn't. My husband couldn't get away from all the stop trains in Emporia. Every stranded passenger wanted to send a message. He didn't come home until Monday, but every night he drove up to the South Bluff to see if the oil lamp was burning in the window. That was our signal that we were all right. On Friday, I started stirring the water with a broom so the mud would go out with it. I went around and around the rooms, and finally, when the water was out of the house, I went to the porch time and again and brought in buckets of water to throw on the floors. You don't wait until you need a shovel. These pine floors held up, but all the veneer furniture and the doors and the piano just fell apart.
She's watching to see whether I find all this eccentric. And she says, I walked out of the house Sunday, but my son put a bundle of clean clothes over his head and waited out Saturday evening, went to town for a good meal. When I came out, first thing I did was get a drink of cold water and a big slice of fruit pie someone brought. Peach it was. Then strangers started coming out to stare and pick through our fields and houses. They carried off more than the river did. For the first time, she shows irritation. She says, I remember that before the water started rising, animals did strange things. Groundhogs, skunks, snakes, all moving. They weren't waiting for the water. A mother skunk got trapped in the barn with her two little ones, and my son lifted the babies up on a feed box, and then the mother climbed up but never raised her tail. She seemed to understand. A neighbor, the French war bride, stopped her pickup on the highway and opened the door to see if a big old hog was all right. He climbed up in the seat and sat down beside her, she said, just like he knowed me. Now, Edith is looking out of the window where she could once count 8 houses along Hunt Street. She says this seriously. If people don't know any better than to live down here, they'll have to suffer the consequences. But I never knew anyone to die in our floods.
In the early summer of 1951, Francis Stedler's husband's parents jacked up their big house, added 3 feet to the foundation, and set the house back down on it. 6 days later, the cottonwood was at the door, and then in the kitchen, the living room, and the family went upstairs. Frances spoke to me for a while about the floods, her story paralleling the others, and when she began talking about her mother-in-law taking the ironing board to the second floor in case she needed a raft, Frances had to stop, and she struggled to say, I'm afraid I can't go on. It's too much remembering how we all were in those days when we were strong enough to fight it. We were together. These people of Saffordville, the whole population, all 5 of them, as they talk their way back into the big floods, grow animated, and sorrows and smiles come and go so quickly about their faces that I almost don't see them, and their eyes are widened and keen. They're not boastful, but they relish, not having beaten the river, but having held their own with it, and not yielding to it other than by climbing a flight of stairs. And the whole time they realize the battle is a little foolish, just the way they want it. They recognize, but do not say how the river whets a fine edge on their lives. I never heard any of them speak love for the river or hate. These are not people locked in the floodplain by poverty. They are held here by recollections of what the river has given them. Hours of a family bound tightly like shocks of wheat, of moments when all their senses were almost one with the land, of times when they earned the right to be tenants on the first terrace of the Cottonwood River. One afternoon, Edith McGregor said to me, "Not everybody gets the chance to live like this."
Thank you everyone for reading. So this section of the text was mainly about, and thank you Emily for screen sharing. So this section of the text was particularly about the river and the floodplain, but in other parts of the text, he talks about the wind and the tornadoes and the grass and the fire and how all these systems are interconnected in the way that the prairie lands kind of maintain itself as a space of like insurgent grasses that just keep growing. And so the parts about wind really stuck with me. So I was thinking tonight for our post-reading breath work, I wanted to play this clip of, while we like just breathe together and close our eyes, play this clip of a sound of wind blowing through these tall grasses. So I'm gonna share my screen in a minute. Let's see. Okay, let me. Okay. So if we could close our eyes, let me know if this is, thumbs up if this is good volume. Okay. So please close your eyes.
It's gone out.
Just listen to the wind. Let your breath flow with the sound of the wind. The sound of the wind through your back to home. Sync up with the rhythm. And so your wind. Other thoughts emerge. Gently summon to the wind. Just let them flow along. You center your awareness on the sound of the wind. And then Deeply. Slowly release. Toes or fingers, open wings. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. So last week we talked about edges and tending to the ecological edges between the wild and the cultivated. And this work of Least Heat Moon sits at the edges of many categories: sociology, anthropology, travelogue, landscape narrative, history, journalism. The list goes on. And I'm, poetry also too, and even cartography, in that like this is a map almost. So in this text, Least Heat Moon is embodying edging between. In part, it makes it kind of a difficult text to read because it's, over 600 pages. It's really long, but it's about a relatively small place, Chase County, which is only 778 square miles. So, and it's also a place that is often understood by Americans or described by Americans as like a place that's depressing or drab. And so what Least Heat Moon does is he kind of subverts that idea by re-enchanting the prairie lands through language. And he takes a space that's tokenized as barren as so many other landscapes we've discussed, whether it be the Matsutake forests or Nevada. And he sheds light on actually the complexity of the land. And, for those of you who have been with us before, in the words of Singh, he notices what's happening with the land. And in the words of Federici, he re-enchants the land. So his edge work is not just about ecological edges, but also about the people and how they interact complexly with the land and with one another. So there's a lot of world building going on between people and people and wind and people and water and wind and grass and water, et cetera, et cetera. So he shows how these relationships build and blossom in a space where disaster can so easily strike. And there's a sense of precarity, but one that's embraced as neither love or hate, but just kind of like a way of being. And so he's making a map of edges, but he's also concerned with depth. And in an interview about his book, he says he wanted to move not just horizontally across the land, but vertically, hence the part of the book title, Prairie Earth, A Deep Map. So there's something to be said about the composition of the text and the composition of the land and the way in which, the grass kind of roots down and his text does the same thing, and how this map kind of parallels or reflects the land. I think that that's something really cool. And so before we begin discussion, I wanted to just quickly share this poem written by Gwen Westerman, a Dakota educator, writer, and artist. And her website bio states that Westerman's roots are deep in the landscape of the tall grass prairie and reveal themselves in her art and writing through the languages and traditions of her family. So quickly, I'm just going to share this poem. Can you see just the poem, or does it show my whole screen? It's just the poem. Okay. And then I'm gonna, sorry, can you still see the poem?
Yes.
Okay, I'm I get confused with screen sharing sometimes. I'm going to play this audio clip of her reading the poem.
Root words. Prairie grasses have roots twice as long as their height, deep footings that steady them against unremitting winds that sweep across the plains. Their roots reach beneath the parched earth, stricken by heat and cold, and nourish them on the remnants of a vast inland sea that teemed with copious sounds of life long ago. Our language is like those prairie grasses, surviving the fires of missionaries and their gods, floods of English words, drought, growing in unexpected places as if it had never been gone. Dakota wichoye ka iapi te unhindapi, maka ki etaha unhipi, ikche wichashta te unhikapi.
So again, here we kind of see that the composition mirrors the verticality of the prairie and the rooting down of the text, and physically, but also kind of symbolically. So after reading Least Heat Moon and listening to Westerman's poem, does anyone have any thoughts on how one might go about re-enchanting the land around them? Last week we discussed tending to the edges. Is edge work inherently a re-enchantment? What might it look like to re-enchant Los Angeles? What might a deep map of Los Angeles look like? And how could we go about making a collective map of our space? So I'm opening up the floor to any discussion that comes to mind. Doesn't have to be about those things either, but yeah.
I'm reminded of placemaking and finding out the history of a place and then representing that history in that spot so that when anybody spends time there, they're also learning about the people that were there before and maybe other things besides people that were there before. Sometimes, like, for example, there was a river that was covered up and one group put in a representation of the river, which no longer was there.
I was struck by the language used in the reading, and I'm really thrilled that you use that poem, because in that poem you see a deeper rooted language, because the indigenous language is rooted in that soil. It's a reflection of the sensorial experience of living there and the cumulative historical memory of living there. And English doesn't do it justice. And that was very evident to me in the contrast between the two readings. So to your question about what it would take to re-enchant Los Angeles, I would say acknowledge the wounds of history and recover the language. And then I think we'll probably see things about the land that that were literally culturally erased, perhaps.
I really appreciated how you put it, Izzy, when you said that the author's intention was to choose a place that was considered drab and overlooked. And I think that if we're going to protect and nurture our land, that has to come from a place of affection. And I think there's no better way to spark affection than to find something charming or enchanting. And so the idea of re-enchanting our land and finding the particularities of every place that make it lovable is key to motivating people's desire as a collective to take action to protect it. Because if you consider something charmless or drab, you're not going to consider it worthy of protecting. And I think that understanding the deep history and the relationship of the Native people to place, and finding respect for that will help hopefully prompt respect for the value of the land beyond its utility, sort of its inherent right to exist.
There was something about the noticing that was alive in the first reading. That even though it was describing terrible things, there was beauty in the description, and it made me feel that a deep map includes human experience, that it's not just the history of how the land lives, but it's the interaction and then just the layers. That's part of the enchantment, because even though I don't understand the indigenous words, they have such a life in them. But it seemed like there was a certain power in hearing the intimate details of the lives lived with these grand gestures of the earth, with the floods and things. So it's leaving me with this feeling that re-enchanting has it's asking for an entry into all the layers that are there, and that how noticing has a transformative quality.
Yeah, what you're saying is making me think of a part of the text a little bit after, where he talks about the tornadoes and he refers to the words of like celestial violence, but then also brings it back to stories of people who have described what it's like being inside, and how there were people who have seen Old Nell, which is a word for tornado, close up under her skirt, talk about her colors: pastel, pink, black, blue, gray. And a survivor said this: all at once, the whole opened up in the sky with a massive cherry red, a yellow tinge in the center. Another said a funnel with beautiful electric blue light. And a third person said it was glowing like it was illuminated from the inside. So I like how there's this heavenly language and like divine language associated with this force, and how it's an enchantment of almost like not hatred, but just respect of its liveliness and its movement. I don't really know what other word to use to describe it.
Yeah, I think that's part of what struck me about this passage when I first encountered it was, working with Metabolic Studio over the years now, I've become more familiar with stories of the LA River and the terminology of the floodplain and what that means, and trying to educate myself around those topics. But when I read this passage, it was one of the first times I've heard a text really talk about the river having a voice and talk about like the floodplain came to life in the context of this passage for me, and yes, the kind of sanctity around the history, the time signature of the river, and how, what does it say, million year tenancy or something like that. The scale of the river and its story and its mark upon this found so moving, and the first person testimony of these people's lives kind of, literally upended by climate, but also so wrapped up and tied to their identity. And coming from a place, a small town in Oregon that went through major transformation and climate devastation this year by wildfire, uh, it's a different kind of threat, but I identified with this idea of how our climate and identity intertwined.
I want to reinforce what Emily said. I too was struck by the sense of the voice of the river and the sense of scale going back in time, and the very human response of feeling like a small being relative to this incredible force that was the river. And I think a part of any discussion on re-enchantment has to do with de-hypnotizing ourselves that the only conscious and agent in this universe is the human brain, and that other living beings have agency, and we just seem to have given ourselves a kind of throning of sorts. We're the only conscious and articulate agent in this universe. And so the more that we are able to allow the other voices to bubble up or to make themselves heard, the more the land is enchanted. And that does involve recognizing our place in the scheme of things. And I think that the reading achieved that. And I think also it was because it was set in historic time and not in the modern time when the whole relationship to land is capitalistic domination. I mean, you go to Kansas, it's ranches, it's fenced off, used ranches. Land has use. And this is from an earlier time when the land did seem immense because it wasn't all spoken for on some satellite imagery and parceled out.
For me, the re-enchantment also is about thinking about the idea that the floodplain and the prairie and the wind and the dust are themselves a re-enchantment of the prairie. So the prairie exists because of all of the disturbance ecology created by floods and wind, and fields of prairie grass pollinate largely because of those ferocious winds. So, one of the things that I thought this section really brought up is the kind of opposition between human habitation and the life of the prairies. Like, you know, floods in that in landscape are a, you know, the river's becoming no longer a river, but a moving block of water that like the author was describing, is part of the reenchantment of a prairie, in the sense that it's part of the natural condition that propagates and support the prairies. So I think it's kind of interesting to think about a reenchantment as Federici was talking about in the book that we read, about being a kind of future condition in which we advocate for the prairie being reenchanted rather than our relationship to the prairie, which is something slightly different. Like to wish for the prairie to be a prairie, and to take ourselves perhaps out of the equation altogether, and imagine that as a reenchantment.
Yeah, I want to say too, I've looked at a lot of like old topographic maps of the whole Mississippi River corridor, and the entire prairie was made by flooding. The sort of rises of land were just mounds of silt that had built up. And you can see the oxbows, the imprints of oxbows left for tens of thousands of years that built up the land. So absolutely, that has an ecological integrity. The whole system of wind, the physical ecology of the place, that's kind of irrespective of the two-leggeds that roam the place now. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so interesting to think about the depth of the roots of the prairie grasses and how they've evolved around the wind. That would, you know, how deep their roots would need to be in order to sustain them. And then, of course, how those roots sustain the soil from eroding under the flood conditions that they're kind of is normal for that. So, you know, the kind of, for me, the reenchantment is, well, let the prairie be the prairie. You know, it wants to be the prairie, and the reenchantment is to wish that for it, you know. And of course, the buffalo have to go back in there too.
I also like this idea of reenchantment that we are keeping going from Federici, because it does suggest that the enchantment or the possibility has already existed, and so it's like an unearthing or an awakening of energy that's already there, already possible, that has existed before, and there is something kind of comforting about that, a re-enchanting instead of an enchanting from scratch. Like it embraces history in a way, it embraces, yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to add something to that as well about it being cyclical, this re-enchantment. I live right, there's a stream right outside of my house, and because of the rains recently, the frogs have emerged. And I know that at some point in LA in the river, there was an abundance of frogs. But the frogs emerged, and then the herons came, and a bunch of other creatures came to the river. And I'm always in anticipation of that time, of that cycle, when the river comes again and brings all of that to it, the sounds and the rustlings down there. So there's a lot of anticipation about that cycle too, for me anyway.
There was one passage in the reading where the woman was said something about we intentionally live down here because of the groundwater level. We don't want to run out of water in the summer, and we're just we're reconciled to the flooding, and that's one way to do it. And I think the other way that populations lived with that system was to be nomadic. I mean, to move to higher ground and then to move back. And so their whole language and their ways were built around mobility. But it was a mobility that was sort of shaped by the land. Which I think there's something to be read there, that we don't impose our structures and then expect the land to work around the human structures.
Totally. And what you're saying is bringing me to this passage, which, forgive me, we didn't read it tonight, but I feel it's very short and very relevant. It's on this chapter about this old highway that was built. And so it no longer remained, but its skeleton was there. And he's standing on it and he's describing the landscape, and he says, "But I'm speaking of the old highway, this ghost of a road, the one under my boots, this one quiet for 30 years and starting to disappear under sediment and scrub. It reveals better than any other place nearby the power of prairie, its continuous insistence, its opportunism, its capacity to lie unheeded and let human intrusion pass, and only then to begin to creep back from what seemed non-existence, to germinate and grow and build a bed of litter that needs only a loose spark to clear away the new and competing trees and really open things again for the grasses, for the native essence of the region." So it's kind of like, yeah, one way to do it is to stay there, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be in place. You might be, moved out, whether you like it or not, by these grasses and the winds and the water and the fire and all the elements that rage. And I think, I don't know, I never thought about the prairie lands in this way, but I think after reading this, I'm like, very cool. The prairie lands are very cool. I want to be like a prairie, I think.
I thought there was something really tender about the image of the woman sweeping the house and stirring the mud so that it wouldn't settle, and the way that the people who live closest to the river have developed sort of idiosyncratic coping strategies that draw them closer to nature and allow them to preserve their way of life. So it seems like it doesn't have to be an either or, like it is that edge where you can exist not in resistance to the river, but really in a symbiotic way, and view it as something that's a purging cycle, good for collectors every so often. And the way that it focused for the people who lived there, their priorities, what they would put on blocks, what they would save the books and the piano, and less concern for the motorcycles and other pieces of furniture. It seems that the cyclical nature of it was kind of taken into their way of life in such a grounding way that's really more of a connection
Well, what I found was really interesting was the dialogue of the woman who wouldn't leave, and some of the dialogues between the husbands and wives, having gone through the Wolsey fire evacuation. It was exactly the same dialogue as some of the old timers here had, saying their roots were here and they were not moving, and you know they were going to die here if the fire took them. And this is like 2 years ago, and the text, what was going back from the 30s to the 50s. So the dialogue, what was said between the husband and wife, was the same thing I heard. That was like, wow. And I think they do put down their own roots, the people who are still there, and learn to live with nature in that way. I was very familiar, having been flooded out as well here. We're in flood and fire zone and perilous paradise, and doing the mud with the broom. I just thought, why didn't I think of that? But obviously, we didn't have, we had the 100-year flood 20 years ago here, and was left with the silt and stuff. But these people, obviously, it's their way of life. It's how they're rooted. They take it, like at the end, she says, I wouldn't have it any other way. I think the prairie is rooted, and I think the people are rooted in the way of the prairie, if that makes sense. I think it was a really tough life for them, but they thought that's normal living on the prairie. That's what we get. And it was very interesting.
Where do you live, Susan?
Topanga.
Ah.
So that floods and fire zone. Yeah, we were actually evacuated 2 years ago, but a lot of people didn't leave. A lot of the old timers would not leave.
But again, just to come back to this theme of disturbance ecology, if we remember that floods and fires are the natural condition for the biodiversity in the Santa Monica Mountains or in the prairie, then the question becomes, is reenchantment also then getting re-in-touched with your DNA's intelligence to actually leave that zone when your life is in danger? Like, I think it's important not to sentimentalize something that is kind of suicidal. Like I think it's, that for me became a kind of bizarre question for me about this author who I know is partly indigenous and partly not. It's like, is he toying with us to actually because I think it's problematic to buy into the sentimentalism of we're being rooted in the prairie, because I think we're rooted even deeper into something called survival, right? And why is it that that's so difficult to click into and make space for? So sorry, I interrupted you, Cascade.
No, that was really actually, I was just going to sort of highlight the psychology of that. People who choose to stay in places that where, the possibility of your mortality rate is raised, shall we say, and to return to those places is because you can. I think what's interesting about this text is that it shows the way that they've been able to integrate their lives in this kind of unintentionally anti-capitalistic way where their human existence is subsumed by the existence of the natural world. And you can return to these places and you can live in these places, but you have to live a certain way, I think, for it to be functional in the long term. And it's not a lesson that Americans learn easily, I guess, or without repeat. And I'm just fascinated by that psychology of, yeah, the dualism of sort of choosing to stay over the safety of your own body. I mean, the safety of your objects at a certain point is one thing, but the safety of your body and your ability to survive is something very different.
When you were talking, I think it was Susan, about the fires and evacuating, I was recalling the fires in Paradise, not to be confused with your quip about Perilous Paradise, but the actual fires in Paradise, where some people, most structures burnt down, but there's a very strong impulse to distort the natural tendency to escape from nature's power by insisting that you should stay. And this is manifested through all these powerful now technologies for fireproofing your house. And there was an amazing news report, I think I saw, of a house that was like untouched by the fire when all the houses around were. And it was this engineer who had figured out how to coat the house and everything. And, you know, he is touted as a clever person because he figured out how to withstand the fire, to prevail. And so then you have to ask, what kind of mentality is that sort of says, I don't care what comes, I know how to, you know, like ward it off. I know how to stay here. And I mean, good for him, his house didn't burn down, but everything else burnt down around him. And it just seems slightly distorted to me. I remember thinking, wow, well, so then the natural ecology doesn't matter. You just find a technology to sort of override it.
You know, I feel like there's another kind of distortion in that too. The people that don't have fireproof houses, but I'm going to stay. I have a feeling, this is imagination, because I will survive through anything and run away from danger and stuff. But I have a feeling there's something about surrender in it that isn't suicidal, but it's a type of recognition of the scale of nature and a kind of giving over that might be misplaced, but it might be some people's way into feeling the difference in scale of the small human life and the whole movement of the land and fire and flood.
Yeah, I feel like fire and flood need to be treated differently because at least with the section we read for today, they said, you know, no one's ever died in the floods before. They've just lost possessions. But we know that even though people can die in floods very easily, whereas like with fires that happen, at least my experience, I grew up for a while in Santa Clarita, and the fires, like, you know, I've watched so many friends' houses burn down. And if you're in that house when it catches fire and you can't get out, it's over for you. There's no going to the second floor. And so I think there's a different kind of like, there's a difference between staying in a burning house versus staying in a house with a flood on the first floor. And one seems like surrender and one feels like weird ego trip. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, one thing they both share in common is suffocation.
That's true. That's true. To bring it back.
I mean, you know, the whole continental global warming portrait is fire and flood. We've got one half of the continent on fire, basically the Intermountain West, and then the seas rising, and massive hurricanes coming in from the southeast and going up the Atlantic seaboard. So, you know, it's been a portrait seasonally of these two conditions. And they both affect respiration. So I think that was part of the fascination for me, is that it seems almost nostalgic to think about your environment as having a particular treachery, when now the entire situation is continentally, if not universally, treacherous, and all affecting our breath. That's the common ground. Or lack of ground.
I posted an article in the chat that many of you probably have come across, but where we in California associate disasters with fire. In fact, the biggest disaster in terms of forecast damages and loss of life would be the Great Flood. And as the indigenous people's memories have it, and they correctly forecast this flood that happened in the 1840s, they said every about 100 150 years there's a massive, you know, biblical scale flood, and so we're due for that anytime soon.
And, you know, just to remind us that the condition of the disturbance ecology of the LA River is flood. So it is a flood control measure that we call a river. There was no river here, there was a floodplain, but the thing we call a river is a flood control strategy. So, you know, flooding is what has galvanized the shape of this city, and the shape of the geopolitics of place is the condition of flooding, not fire.
I wonder how or when that might start to change, though. I don't know. I mean, it does just feel so much more real, the relocation, based on the wildfires now, the degree to which they've gotten in the West. But I don't actually know what those numbers are. But yeah, I mean, definitely historically, yeah, that's a great point about floods.
Maybe it'll change when the big earthquake comes.
The one we always forget about.
Exactly. Oh yeah, that.
Yeah, I want to see how that fireproof house does and all of that.
Yeah. Well, it's earthquake proof too. I'm just kidding.
There goes all that breath work.
Your bunker.
Out the door. I'm gonna have to do another meditation after this.
Yeah.
Well, that was our light week. This was our light week of reading everybody. This was the feel good of this. Is everybody uplifted now?
Yeah, so relaxing.
I was just glad that the hog got saved.
I love that part. The hog jumped in the truck.
Yeah.
Take me home.
I like the skunk.
Yeah.
So cute. I wish I could pick them up without spraying me.
Ew.
Would anyone like to share what they've been working on?
Embroidery wise?
Sure. Or if you're working on something else you'd like to share with the group.
I'm working on building check dams in a watershed, hoping that a flood will come.
Yeah.
Waiting for a flood, really. I live in Baja, California, and this year we haven't had a lot of rain. But this year we decided to begin large construction on a 2,000-acre property, creating, trying to keep the water on the land. So we're, like I said, sort of praying for a flood, maybe next year by the time we're done with our dam building. But I could also share this, what I'm working on, which I haven't got too far on because, well, whatever. I'm doing the raven. But I put all this kind of breathing outness into him.
Whoa.
And then a friend of mine just told me that he had a raven living in his pine tree down here, two of them, a couple. And one morning he woke up and one of them was dead on the road. And the other raven is just calling out every day for her mate. And I was wondering, can you adopt ravens that lost their mates? Does anybody know about that?
That's a negative. That would be a negative. They're very hard to work with. And if you have an adult raven, that would be impossible. Usually, if you get them when they're young, they're one of the most intelligent birds, more intelligent than the crows. And what happens is they become quite a nuisance. They could become very bonded to whoever's raising them. And we get calls on nuisance ravens that people have decided to raise as, young, and then they get to 1 or 2 years old and become really obnoxious. So I would say it wouldn't be a good idea. Just a thought.
It couldn't be a companion for my solitary pig.
I have a little baby pig for your pig if you like. Looking for a home. We'll send them.
She might be looking for a home. Is it a potbelly pig?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, maybe I can chat with you in the chat bar about it.
Okay.
What other things are people working on that they might want to share? Anyone want to give a little embroidery update or project update?
I'll update on my my bee. I love the iridescent threads so much for the wings.
Wow.
That was really, really fun to work with and just the right amount. And now I'm doing the rest of the body. And it's really fun to work on the bee and then go into my garden and study the bees as they're going from plant to plant.
That's gorgeous.
I'm also working on a raven.
Wow.
Oh, cool.
I like the colors.
Whoa.
That's an uncommon raven.
Beautiful.
Very
Or a embroidery raku raven. I also am fascinated by ravens, and Walker, there's a really good book that I read called The Mind of the Raven. And I tried to cut and paste it on the chat bar, but it wouldn't let me. But it's about this guy who learned to speak with ravens. He learned their language, and he was able to have like a lifelong relationship with ravens. That he didn't tame them or adopt them as a pet, but they definitely.
Right.
So I check out The Mind of the Raven. It's a really, really amazing book.
Thank you. I will. Yeah,
Lauren,
I
on
had a
your
friend out
raven?
in the desert. Who,
What?
Oh, sorry. I was just going to ask about your raven. Are you coloring it in with?
Well, see, at the beginning of the session, I couldn't find my needle. So I just started pretending I was embroidering, but with color pencils, because I was making kind of like lines like I would if I were embroidering. And then it kind of helped me when I found my needle to make better. Like, I don't know.
love it.
It helped me. So it was
I love it.
Color pencil embroidery strategy.
I think it's great.
It's called the Uncommon Raven.
Looks cool.
It's not entirely what I had in mind, but I'll take it.
Are you starting on that bird, Roxanne? You're on mute, I think, if you were trying to say something.
Yeah, I was just testing if I could show it. I'm just trying to do a better stitch this time, so I don't know. I just started on it, but I don't know if you can see the. It's I don't know what it's called. I think it's. I don't know. Anyway, I'm trying to do it. I couldn't decide if I want to fill it in or not, so I thought I'd work on my stitches. So that's all I did.
Does anyone have any tips for threading this multi-threaded thread through the tiny eyes of the needle? I've been working on it for about 45 minutes over here.
Get it right and flatten it.
Is
Bigger
it
needle?
iridescent?
No, it's not. I haven't started with the iridescent, but I'm pumped on the iridescent as well.
Okay, one tip that I'll tell you that helped me with the iridescent is I took clear nail polish and I painted the ends of it because I felt that it unraveled and was kind of hard to use. So just like a little tiny dab, it made it like 1,000% easier to thread and use.
Okay, great. I'm getting unraveling with the other ones as well. And I don't know if I should just cut off the ends. I don't want to waste the thread, but sorry, I'm very basic embroiderer, so I just thought I would ask.
No, it's good. It's good to share knowledge here.
Yeah.
I just pulled the iridescent thread apart because it was so hard to work with I wanted more. And so I used each, like there are, 4 or 5 strands. I separated it out.
Be great. I was thinking about doing that too, but does it look, I mean, then you're doubling your work sort of, but that's okay too.
It wasn't hard. It slipped apart pretty easily.
Great. Thank you. What do you got?
Cat purring? Sorry, I hear like a cat purring or something.
Is it Jen's
Oh,
kitty?
sorry, it's Fig.
No, I was just like,
I thought it was muted.
Oh, the motor of the kitty. Oh, I love that sound.
You can leave it, Jen, if you want.
I'll also give you all a good insight. I took my embroidery to the beach last weekend, and it was amazing, the lighting. I was able to fly through it like I haven't been able to in the house. I was like, wow. So I highly recommend it.
Good idea.
Good advice. Lauren. Critter wants to say hello to you. Say hi to Lauren.
Oh,
hi.
Hi to Lauren.
Oh my God. I miss Critter so much. Is Critter still obsessed with chasing balls and sticks and everything?
Oh God. It's her only job. It's her role in life is to fetch and retrieve it. That's her job. Say hi to Lauren.
She is so good at it. And Walker, this is sorry, everybody, but I just wanted to tell you that finally the bees are starting to work on the jeweler's cabinet.
Oh, are they? Did they come back?
Oh, 2 years, but
just on their own?
Yeah.
Oh, that's really good news. I'm anxious to get home and come by for a visit and have a look.
Okay, when are you coming back?
Next week.
Okay, good. Let's get together, catch up.
Okay. That's exciting. Maybe all of those things you've been planting will be helpful for them.
You know, they found where we keep the irrigation. They made a home. They made a home inside the purple recycled water underground.
Oh.
It's now their.
They love.
Yeah.
They love those spaces. Those spaces, and also, gas meters at people's houses. They're about that size too. Well, that's exciting. I'm happy to hear that they willingly are coming, that I didn't bring them there. That's a good sign.
Yeah.
It's bee season.
Yeah.
I'm gonna sign off, everyone. Good night. Thanks for a lovely evening.
Good night, Rowena.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm gonna sign off too. It's nice seeing everyone.
Ansu, thank you for coming. It's so nice to see you.
Great to see
Likewise, I missed you guys. Thank you.
If you want an embroidery, we'll send you one.
No, I have it.
Okay. We have we now have we're working into the biogeocoinosis series. So you can keep with native plants, or you could go with birds of the moon. And we're starting a new series of all the things you see underground through a microscope. So Mish is working on that right now for our next series, which will be starting in the middle of April.
Ooh.
Portraits of the underground, various bacteria and yeast. And
Whoa, that's going to be an exciting embroidery invitation.
So finish up that ribbon, Walker.
I know. Now I've got to get to the beach and get it done.
Yeah. Good night, Ansu.
Bye.
So, Lauren, I was, between all the discussion we have between the rainbow serpent and the biology, and so I started to try to understand how those things work. So it's not ready. I'm just trying to understand how, exchanges work. It's very, it's very too detailed, just for me to understand what I can do with the non-visible, because I'll never be able to go to this level of even with a microscope. So I'm just trying to understand the invisible and how I can translate it. But yes, every time there's a reading or a discussion, it just enrich it and makes it more complex, and sort of have to update my way of thinking. And anyway, so it's very exciting.
That's a beautiful drawing. Thank you for sharing. I can't wait to see how it evolves. Mish is our very own Michelangelo.
I missed the drawing. Can you show it again?
That's the rainbow serpent. It's a new piece outside. It's a living systems graffiti. It's outside at the Anabolic at the studio, ceramic pipe, and well, you'll see when
Wow. Yeah, I'd love to see that.
I would like to do a more abstract embroidery next.
You're in luck. You're in luck.
It sounds like
Yeah.
We've got the job for you.
It's more freeing. I don't want to be
amoebas and cells and yeah.
Exactly, because somebody would look at it and won't necessarily say like that's not what a mule fat looks like because it's underground. So unless you're a scientist,
and they might be surprised that they find exactly what you did.
Exactly.
Cindy, let's see where you got.
I finished mine and I don't have a new one to work on.
Oh, that's right. You said that at the beginning.
Yeah. I wonder who I should ask for a new embroidery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, it looks like I haven't paid my electric bill.
It's like a Vermeer painting in your kitchen. It's beautiful.
I want a spotlight on me.
Yeah, your lighting really is gorgeous.
Very dramatic. I like it. I'm crashing pretty hard, everyone. I'm going to sign off. It was great to be with you.
Thanks, Emily.
Great to read this book with you. See you soon.
See you later.
Have a nice
See
weekend.
you later.
Thank you for all the reading of this book with me.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
I think I'm going to sign off. My computer's about to go to sleep. It was really lovely being with you all. Thank you for offering this. I'm really enjoying it when I can get connection
So
to,
nice
to be involved. Thank you.
to have you, Walker. See you soon. See you next week, maybe in the flesh.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that would be lovely. Okay. See you all. Bye.
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 Jen, you want to do a half hour of Spanish?
Not a bad idea. That definitely could happen. What would you want?
Tomorrow morning. So it's a slippery slope. If you have dinner now, you're going to want to do your laundry. And we are not going to prepare for class unless we
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Especially after I eat. I'll be like,
no, that and yeah.
yeah, I'm game.
Trisha.
Oh, you're muted, Patricia.
I thought I unmuted myself. So I was saying that I really love that embroidery. It's very inspiring, Jen, the one behind you.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to hear it. I was like a very uncommon raven.
Oh yeah, but you put the purple in there, like you colored it. Yeah.
And the blue. I was like, what?
Magical raven. It's an enchanted raven.
Yeah, it's a raven in infra color.
It's a raving.
Well, I watched Chasing Coral last night. Have you seen that?
I haven't. Is it good?
It's pretty depressing.
Oh, okay.
To be honest.
Yeah.
But you know, the coral reefs, the areas that have died before they went dark, you know, they bleach and then they go dark, they die, they fluoresce. And so they, you know, were watching them and they were like, what's going on? And they were just glowing like purple and they're like, wow, what is this? It's like their swan song. It was the end before they bleached and then died. It was wild. It was like a performance.
Wow.
Yeah. So your purple raven, I don't know. You know, we have a bird issue here, you know that, right? That they're dying, yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, yeah, it's hard not to get depressed about this. This last week's been tough. And, you know, the thing is that we're all in this together, you know, and getting depressed or being in denial, either extreme isn't going to change it. So we just have to be present and do everything that we can and know that, yeah, you have to kind of let go because, you know, we have all the knowledge. We just have to apply it and we're still not in control.
Nope.
Yeah. And we have each other.
We do. We're in community with each other and
communicate with each other. We can share and love, and we have all these capacities. So it's all a gift.
Yep.
Okay, I'll go.
Good night.
Did you actually message me, Lauren, this week?
I didn't. I tried to reach you on Monday, and then all of a sudden the week was like.
Okay, well that's what I meant because I was like, when I didn't hear from you, I thought maybe she got hijacked.
I did, but it was
okay.
it was only because of the time vortex, which I know you know all
That's
about.
totally fine. Yeah, I was like, no big deal. But then
I
I
really
thought, wait a minute, did she get hijacked? Like somebody got her phone or.
Hadn't seen you in a long time, and I was really just checking in to share notes, and it was a friendly call. But thank you for asking.
We will connect.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone.
Bye. Okay.
Well, do you want to take like a 10, Lauren?
10 minutes?
Yeah.
5.
Okay, 5.
I know we're not going to want to do it. We only have to do it for a half hour.
Okay, yeah, we'll do a half hour. We're going to do it.
Get ready, because otherwise we're going to be a disaster of nerves tomorrow.
I know. C is for dad.
That is so funny in class when she's nervous. Her strategy is usually just to out herself right away, right? So it makes it so much more awkward. Like, strategies for coping with nervousness are so different. I like copy all the answers to all the questions and I have them right in front of me, right? So that I don't have to worry about being like, Jen will say, I'm just going to say right out loud, I'm completely confused.
How many people are in your class?
Like, it's okay, Jen.
I did.
She said, no.
I totally did. I was waiting for you to chime in, like, yeah, I'm confused too. And then I just sat there and I was like,
I'm sitting there on the other side. The teacher's not going to know if you don't tell her. Yeah. We're trying to see how many Spanish classes we can get demoted from until we finally know the difference between a star and Ser one of these days.
We're getting there.
Yeah. Jen, your black background with that embroidery looks terrific.
I'm really happy it held up this week. Some weeks it slides down.
It's amazing what that density of white against beige cloth does. I don't think I've ever really realized how potent white can be.
I agree.
I don't think I would have had the instinct to make a field of white.
No, it's beautiful. It's so crisp. And what I have to say, I really loved is how Maria handled like this space in here. I'll show you closer. She did different directional embroidery. So it can you see it? I'm not sure if you can see.
Yeah.
It gives it a whole nother layer in the multiple directions that she went through.
Yeah, it's really amazing.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I wish she was here because I would love to know. I cannot figure this out. Cindy, maybe you've seen this stitch. Have you seen this stitch? The orange one?
Hold on. Let me pin you. So it almost looks, is it not, it's not a French knot?
No, it's not. I don't think so. I thought French knots kind of were more bundled together, and this seems like it's more almost like it's twisted. I don't know. It's beautiful though.
Oh,
it's like she really picked up what you'd see.
I think you twist. I think you wind the thread on the needle before you stick it in to your next area.
Like you twist it like this?
No, you just so you have your needle, right? Well, I got you get your needle. This is your needle. And then your thread, you just wrap it around the needle, and then you stick the needle with the wrapped thread back into the embroidery, and then you pull it through the bottom, and then it'll leave like a twisted look.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know what it's called, but I did that for my onion.
Huh.
I'm gonna go eat dinner, but it was lovely seeing
Good
you.
night.
Good night,
Izzy,
Izzy. Thank you.
I really enjoyed your poem, and I thought it was so nicely placed after the reading this time. I didn't realize you were going to do that because you usually wait till the end.
Yeah.
I thought that was really, really nice. And it was also incredibly smart to have that recording so that you didn't have to worry about pronouncing all of those words.
Skipping over, I didn't want to do that, so it was nice to find
And
it.
it was actually quite startling how like if you look at the language, you still I would not have guessed in any way how to make the sound of those words.
I know.
So-
It's very embodied. I had another poem that I was also going to share, but then it just felt like at the end, but then it just felt like too much. So that one really stands its ground in an amazing way. And it was lovely to hear her read it for sure. Changed the vibe of the text.
For sure.
But it was lovely seeing you all. And yeah, I can't believe next week's your last week. I'm going to
I know. I feel so sentimental. Yeah, next week's the last week of this series, and then we have a pause. And then we are coming back in with something else. We'll see what.
A new assemblage.
But I really, really have enjoyed this series. It's been really good, and we've had pretty nice group every week.
Yeah.
And I think we're getting good at this.
I think you guys are getting really good at this.
All right. Have a good dinner.
Okay.
Have a good weekend. Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Good night, everybody.
Then just stay on, or should we close out?
Let's close out because I think it'll continue recording.
Okay, you don't want notes of us studying.
I can send you a new link.
Okay.
Bye.